Welcome to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. On this show, you'll receive tools for relational health that you can apply wherever you are on your journey in love. You'll learn how to anchor your security within you so you can co-create balanced, interdependent relationships that fill your cup. Let's get the love flowing. Becoming Secure in Love starts now. Hello, I'm Love Coach Mariya, and you're listening to Becoming Secure in Love on transformationtalkradio.com. Stick with me for the next hour and you'll learn how to touch your own heart. In every episode of this show, we examine the challenges that love can present and explore the various ways to shift from push and pull to peace of mind. The topic of this episode is Rom-Scams, yet another reason to root your security internally. And I have fellow coach Trish Laub here to discuss it with me. Trish is an author, a consultant, and a speaker, among many other things. After spending 2 decades developing computer systems, she went on to co-found both a national dance education company and a national nonprofit prevention theater company focused on helping at-risk teens. In addition, she is a black belt instructor of the Nia technique and has been licensed since 1999. Using her previous computer and teaching experience in combination with her most recent caregiving experience, Trish also founded Comfort in Their Journey, based on her 3-book series that provides practical guidance for providing dignified care through the end of life. Trish is the author of a total of 5 books and continues to serve as a speaker and consultant on a variety of topics. Most recently, she unexpectedly found herself experiencing the world of catfishing and romance scams. She is joining us today to share a cautionary tale for others to spare themselves potential heartache, stress, and even financial ruin. Trish, I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's start by just tell me what these scams are.
Okay, there's the term catfishing, and catfishing means creating that someone has created a false persona. So they've put up a profile that may be created from stolen pictures from somebody else, or they could just be generated pictures of someone who doesn't exist. And the whole purpose is to lure someone into a sense of false intimacy and trust so that they can be exploited for usually money, sometimes for identity theft. And it is in 2021 in the United States alone, it was over $1 billion industry. And the people who are doing this work are extremely skilled, masterful, well-trained, and it's affecting more and more people every day.
That's just crazy. I mean, I guess it's not entirely shocking. You know, I remember the Nigerian email scams. I'm a prince, and I'm going to give you money, I just need you to put it in your bank account. And, the scammers have been utilizing every form of, the internet for decades now. So I suppose it just didn't occur to me that eventually they would make their way to online dating. And it makes sense, especially because a lot of people, sadly, are, kind of extra vulnerable in that dating world. They're just really putting their hearts out there, and they're not necessarily feeling like they need to be on guard, but kind of gotta.
Well, for sure. It's the dating world. It's not just even the dating world, it's social media. 2 of the largest platforms for romance scams are people who have approached other people through Facebook and Instagram. So it's not even just the dating apps. It's kind of taken an interesting evolution too, because until recently, I thought it was almost entirely online. And I have, in the last month or so, encountered several people who have had this happen to them physically dating somebody. I mean, in real life. With the romance scams that are with the catfishing profiles, the people are so skilled that they manage to never meet their target. And so it's kind of interesting and a little scary in a way that people are doing it in person now. Yeah, it really is. It's
Old.
as you said, that's why it's so very important to be rooted in your own security and
Yeah.
everything.
So
Yeah.
tell me some of the things to watch out for, kind of
Sure.
some flags about the scams.
I actually went on the apps in search of a friend. I wasn't looking to date, but I was looking, for friendship. And I have a hard time navigating the world, doubting everybody, looking for the bad. But I will say what I did that prevented me from being exploited, because I waited right up until the ask, and then that was one of my boundaries. I had two boundaries. One for me was no lies. So if I were to ever encounter, and this is true in my personal life with friends and everything, I catch in a lie, I can't go beyond that. That's me. So that was one boundary. The other boundary was no money. I don't care what the ask is. I don't care what the reason is. Again, the people who are making these asks are incredibly skilled. And it ranges everything from, I have this debt, so I can't leave the country to come see you. When you see the setup for the ask is a red flag. But even back before that, what typically will happen, and it's not just only my experience, I've talked to many people at this point. If you meet somebody online, they will typically want to jump off of the platform that they were on. And in some ways, I don't necessarily see that as a problem, because if you give them a phone number, you can block them. You can block them from Instagram. But the reason they do it is then they can profess that they're going to delete their profile because they're done looking for their person. Well, they want to delete their profile, so there's no trace. So the first thing I do is I screenshot their entire profile, so I have it. But then they will move straight into false intimacy. So they're very good at asking personal questions that shows interest. And fast forward past this whole experience that I had, I found online there are actually scripts that are given to scammers to use. They may not adhere verbatim, but the skeleton's definitely there. And I find this one kind of interesting. I dealt with two different scammers, and they both professed to be European. And early on, they started asking if I had eaten. And then they wanted to know what I ate, which I find very, very interesting, because Americans, I don't think, do that. I wouldn't say, hey, Mariah, what'd you have for lunch? Did you eat? But to whoever's writing these scripts, that is a way of showing concern. And that kind of struck me first. I was like, well, that's odd. Maybe that's a European thing, But then they will begin to say beyond kind of like, well, I'm going to delete my profile, which is a show of caring or interest, to caring about actually what they do is they mirror you. It took me a while to figure this out. So they would ask a question like, what are your favorite things to do? And being excited, I share. And the response is, it seems like you've stolen all the things I like. So they start mirroring back to you. Like I said, they're very, very, very skilled. They will share a piece of information. In my case, one of them shared a supposed last four of their social security number because they trusted me so much. Well, they didn't trust me so much. They wanted me to trust them so much. And again, I'm cautious. So another rule is I never give out any financial account information, but I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. I haven't found the lie yet. And then they do the kind of the love bombing. They're very cautious. It'll be in one of my cases, they started sending a song every morning, and they got more and more love oriented. And I was like, all right, this is kind of interesting. Then before they actually begin to profess the actual love part of it, they will almost apologize because they don't want to scare you. I know, look at her face. I know. There is a method to this whole madness. And I dealt with two different people. One I would say was kind of a beginner scammer, not as skilled. Yeah. And I dealt with that one first. And then I encountered the second one, who I would say was highly skilled. And I started immediately seeing the commonalities between the two. So in one case, the ask was for me to invest in an investment in London or whatever. And my actual thought while I'm hearing the ask is, if this information was true, it would be insider trading. So I wasn't going to do it anyway. And then, but he had mentioned this investment before. So they set the seeds. The second one needed money for a debt in Europe in order to come back, but he had set the seed. So it's looking for the little pieces in the threads of the seeds that get to the ask. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, if you zoom out a little bit, I can't imagine why I would be talking about anything financial with a person I met anything less than, I don't know, a couple months minimum.
This gets kind of another whole topic. I think that I had just listened to an interview by, I think his name is Vivek Murthy, and he was the 19th General, Surgeon General. And he went around the country and he thought he was researching the opioid epidemic, but he learned that loneliness was it. And so there's this loneliness in our culture for a variety of reasons, but COVID really just capped that right on off because we were so isolated. So it makes people very vulnerable. We are so in need of connection. And these people are, like I say, I cannot even tell you how skilled they are at what they do. They weave this whole thing, and they're doing it based on our need to connect.
Yeah.
Which is really, really horrible.
So we're going to dig into that a little bit more, but real quick first, will you tell me just briefly, like the kind of the best things to do if you find yourself in a scam or suspect that you might be involved in a scam?
Walk away, shut it down, block the number. It's not negotiable. I said goodbye with a hard period after it when I finally got the ask, and then I went down the rabbit hole and found all the lies. But he came back to me for 3 more weeks. I just wanted to know what would happen. I did not ever respond.
Yeah.
It took 3 weeks, and trust me, he knew my vulnerabilities and came straight at me with them to see if I would come back around to him.
Wow.
So
now what if you want to do something to like try, and is there any hope of like shutting them down so that they can't?
Not really. You can report it, and I do recommend reporting it to the FBI site for scams.
Okay.
You can report it to the Federal Trade Commission. In my case, money wasn't taken from me, no transactions.
Yeah.
I did not give him anything, but so the Federal Trade Commission isn't as interested. But
Yeah.
the problem is they're typically international, which takes it out of the FBI's domain.
Gotcha.
And in the realm of comparison to human trafficking and serial killers, these people have not committed a crime.
So once again, this is just a thing where we just need to, empower ourselves and
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Becoming Secure in Love, from Push and Pull to Peace of Mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya, and my guest, Trish Laub. We've been discussing how to spot a scam and just now what to do with one. And when we come back, we'll explore what online dating looks like with secure attachment. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from Push and Pull to Peace of Mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. You can find me at lovecoachmariya.com. And my guest today is Trish Laub, author, consultant, and speaker. If folks want to get in touch with you, Trish, what's the best way?
Sure. They can go to my website, Trish, Trish, Laub, Laub as in boy.com, and go to the contact tab.
Perfect. Thanks. Before the break, we were discussing how to spot a scam and what to do with one, which, by the way, the answer is walk away. And we were just about to get into what online dating looks like with secure attachment. So, that's kind of the name of the game on this show, developing internally rooted security. And there's, some general rules of engagement for maintaining empowered compassion in online dating. And I'm a huge advocate of not sacrificing your compassion in order to be or feel empowered, but actually empowering your compassion in such a way that it is big enough to include you. And so, one of the things that's really important when dating is, especially folks with insecure attachment, we tend to like hyper focus on like what the other person is thinking of us. Oh, are they liking me? Do I look okay? Like, am I being funny enough? Am I interesting? And a more secure approach to dating is paying attention to how you feel around them. Like while you're around them, whatever they're doing, whatever their vibe, their energy is, even if you're not physically present, you can still get a sense of their energy from interacting with them online. And it's important to notice how you're feeling. Oftentimes, those butterflies that we get, sometimes it's excitement, but sometimes it's actually anxiety. And if you're feeling anxious, that's not necessarily a good thing. Trish, what's some of your experience with that?
Definitely. I found through this and other things that sometimes that weird feeling in your stomach, butterflies, I don't know what it is. When someone pushes my boundaries, it's like this, that's where it is. And I think in the same part of your body is that warning system, as well as the butterflies that are good, and to differentiate what it is you're actually feeling. And to associate that with what or why. So in the case of someone pushing your boundaries, if they're asking for more and more, information or whatever, that's one of your warning systems that keeps us safe.
Absolutely. And it's kind of shocking, really, how often we override those.
Yes, for sure.
Yep. When we spoke previously, oh my goodness, my dog is just very restless tonight. It's a little distracting. I apologize for all the background clicking and clacking. And of course, on a side note, I closed the dog door because I didn't want her coming in and out, and now she just keeps pacing back and forth around it. So, I can't win them all. In any case, you and I had spoken previously about that super skillful person that you were talking to. Mm-hmm. You said that one of the things that he was doing that you kind of noticed, like a bit into it, you're like, oh, wait a second, is that essentially just like he was asking so much about you and you were giving away all these things, and he was just like, oh, those are my interests too. Mm-hmm. And I remember I noted that, like, that's sort of another danger of what they call oversharing, which is really sort of like an abandonment of our own boundaries. Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases, but in some cases it can also be a little bit of a detriment to giving away all of your personal information to somebody who can then just mirror it back to you, and then you feel super connected.
Right. Exactly. I think I've kind of come up with a different, not that I'm doing the online thing anymore, that's just my personal choice.
Yeah.
I found great consistency from site to site. So even in meeting people in person, I have a different strategy now. And that would be to maybe tell them two things that I'm interested in. And then to say, well, how about you? Or to immediately flip it to come up with some way to get them to tell you first, but not to give it all away. And I think the whole online thing is conducive to oversharing, because I know when I'm messaging with somebody, yep. I don't want to do is I want to minimize the messages so they're more compact. So we don't have to go back and forth 5 times on what we like to do. It's just boom.
These are all my things. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's partly just the culture of messaging that it lends itself to maybe oversharing, just because in a kind of a context of wanting to put it all in a message, send it, have them respond to everything.
It's almost reminding me.
Now that we don't do phone calls, really. Although I've spent hours on the actual phone with the more skilled man.
Oh my gosh. But that reminds me of, like, even before the phone, when we used to write letters, right? You would put it all in letters.
Yes.
And now
'Cause-
we're doing that with messaging, even though it's instant.
Well, and the other thing too, and I hadn't thought of this till you just said this. I think it's partly because I am sure that at least the more skilled one was never in the United States. He claimed to live in the town next to mine, but I don't believe he was ever in the United States. So there was a great time difference, and he was supposedly over there working, and would come back at some point in time. And so while he was working, there was probably a 9-hour time difference. So you do jam it all in a message, because to give 2 pieces of information and wait 9 hours, it's a 24-hour cycle then of communicating. And I think that probably lends itself to the maybe oversharing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, to that, I will also say that just in terms of building a strong foundation for a healthy, balanced, interdependent relationship, you have to kind of weave the balance in from the jump, and I like your suggestion that like maybe give 1 or 2 things and then flip it and ask them a question about them. And I know, again, back to that sort of insecure attachment, we tend to like feel a bit rushed to like, it's like, we just want to get to the deep end ASAP. Like, here's all I want to just give you everything there is to know about me so that then we can just be connected and like you can just get straight to the intimacy. But like you can't rush the growth of a tree. Like a tree is going to grow in the time that it takes to grow, and you're not really going to have shade until it's grown. And so you just have to let relationships develop over time. And we're so conditioned to this like instant gratification of the online clickable world, right? That we think we can just like click to a relationship, and you can't. Like really the only way to truly get to know somebody is through repeated interactions over time. And you just have to feel how you feel around them. You have to observe how they respond to things that come up in life. Like really knowing somebody isn't what can be written down anyway. So just my advice is don't rush it.
No, and there are some clues to that too. Very often the catfisher men can catfisher people, because it's not just men. They will say they have jobs in the military, construction, anything that will require them, like oil rigs, anything that require them to leave the country. So you're in this space where you can't, they're never going to meet you. They're not real. But they are very good at creating that. And so I find that it could be easy to, it changes the dynamic, because you keep thinking they're going to come back in a week. They're going to come back in a week. And they always have a reason why they can't. But they're all the while, words of affirmation, all the different, things like that. And they are completely supporting you, sharing with them.
I think you told me this before when we talked before too, that I really liked. If they're like, well, I'll be back in town like next week or something, then you just cut off the conversation, say, okay, cool. Call me when you're in town.
Absolutely. My new part of my new strategy is somebody would have to, I would say, meet me within 3 to 7 days. Now, there are legitimate things. I know that people's, family gets sick, they have to travel. And that's when I would say, great, let's book the date for when you'll be home, and I'll talk to you then. Because you can get through some of it. You can put on your profile or your whatever, however people are coming to you, and say, I require meeting somebody in the first week. That will cut some out right there. You tell them that you're not going to talk to them until they're back in the country and can meet you. You will not hear from them again.
That's a great tip to say that I like. You can even just like make it sound a little bit more casual and just say like, hey, I like to meet people within the first week. Like I don't like chit-chatting.
And I have been there was like a catfishing person prior to the 2 that I actually spent time talking to. And about 3 or 4 days into messaging with him, just kind of lightheartedly and stuff, I said, this is nothing personal, but I don't know that you're real, and you don't know that I'm real. So could you provide me with some social media, some website who's supposedly self-employed, so that I could see that you're real, and I'd be happy to reciprocate in kind. Gone. Kind of along your lines too, I would think, I would, and my new strategy would be if they say they live in the next town, oh, what's your address? Pretty sure that conversation is going to stop.
Crickets.
I figured, it wasn't really that important to me, but that's also a valuable piece of information because you can go on your county's assessor's website and see even if the address he gave you belongs to him.
I have to admit though that I would never give out my address, so I don't know that I would ask for it.
I kind of agree with you. At some point, once somebody has verified a certain amount of information, I don't even have to give my address out. You just put somebody's name in, and there's a website out there that you can find out everything.
Yeah, but I don't want somebody showing up at my door, and I wouldn't blame someone else for not wanting me to show up at their door. They don't know who I am either. So
I agree. But at some point, if they're not on social media, which is very rare or on the web, if they're not on the web anywhere, then you might ask for their address.
I would just ask to meet in person.
Well, in my case, the person was supposedly in Europe all that time.
Well, then I'm not into long distance. So,
well, I didn't have that strategy then. I should have talked to you first.
That was my problem anyway.
I'm just kind of going along, not whatever. I mean, I still had the one lie rule, but I couldn't find a lie. So I was like, all right, we'll keep going. Okay. Till either lies or ask me for money. And
I love you.
Then it blew up spectacularly.
Wonderful. Well, let's take one more break. Love Coach Mariya. You're listening to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind. And my guest is Trish Laub. We've been discussing what online dating looks like with secure attachment. And when we come back, we'll explore some just general safe practices for modern dating. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. You can find me at lovecoach.mariya.com. And my guest today is Trish Laub, author, consultant, and speaker. And if folks want to get in touch with you, Trish, will you tell us again where to find you?
Sure, at Trish, Trish, Laub, Laub as in boy.com.
Fantastic. Before the break, we were discussing what online dating looks like with secure attachment. And we were just about to get into some more safe practices for modern dating. With online dating in particular, Trish, I know you had mentioned that the authorities will often say to keep them online longer so that you have that like paper trail, whatever, like some evidence. In general, though, not always. In the beginning, I used to chat online a lot first, but then when I was doing online dating, and by the way, I started back in 2006 or 2007 with OkCupid.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I was on and off that one for a while. And I've been on and off online dating for years, but I think I'm actually done with it. Like, just personally, it's just so contrived. It's hard for me to swallow anymore. But in any case, what I found was that if whenever I met them, it was always different than I expected, and rarely like better or worse, just sideways. It was just different. It was always very different than I expected. And so after a few iterations of that, I was just like, well, that's pointless. Like, I think I'm getting to know somebody, and then it turns out I'm wrong. So let's just meet. So for me, it was as soon as I found somebody that I was interested in, I would, maybe do like a little bit of back and forth, and then be like, cool. So when do you want to get together for beers or something, And like, so for me, it was like meet early and meet in public.
Yes. Absolutely. I think if I understood you right, you said that the authorities want you to stay on. They actually don't. They want you to stay. I thought
you had said that.
I do not advise what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Because I knew what I was doing. I have computer skills.
Right.
I knew how to research things. I chose to stay on so I could get voice recordings and a few other pieces of information I wanted. I also knew I was perfectly safe. I do not recommend anybody else does that. The minute you suspect a scam, walk away. You can ghost them. This is probably the best bet. Just block them, be done, because they're going to come back at you 5,000 times harder. Because think of it this way. In many cases, it's an internet cafe or a call center. They've just lost one of their quota. And trust me, when this man decided to come back, this one in particular, he hit every vulnerability I have. And I just sat there and went, okay. But I knew I could handle that. I was not going back.
Right.
I do not recommend that to anyone.
Well, I think you had said something about earlier, like they say don't, or at least don't switch platforms or something. Was that what they said?
Yes, I'm sorry. Even on the dating sites, they list like 5 tips, and so does the FBI. But who goes on a dating site and thinks I better check the FBI site? But anyway, they did say that they recommend communicating on the platform. I know within my daughter's demographic, which she's 35, several other age groups, that's just not how people communicate today. They don't stay on the apps. I understand why, but I think, when I realized I had scam issues, I immediately printed out every message that was written. I had all of that information. I could block them from that, but they tell you to stay on the platform. I'm kind of indifferent on that one. As long as it's a major platform like WhatsApp or, Facebook messaging or something like that. I wouldn't go on some obscure.
That you're switching to, you mean?
Yeah, if you do switch. So yeah, they suggest you stay on it, but part of the reason they want you off of it is then they can delete their profile.
Right.
There's no trail.
Well, win some, you lose some, I guess.
Yeah, whatever. Yes.
So as we were discussing a little bit, behind the scenes on the last break, the next thing I kind of wanted to mention is, none of this is for any of you to go out and like be afraid. It's that balance, right? It's something that I find in our modern society's relationship with romantic relationships is that it's almost like this black and white extremes, it's like polar extremes where it's either like super rugged individualism, spiked walls, or like totally enmeshed codependence and like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I can't tell where I end and you begin. And it's like, no, that's not okay. I used to think that was just, divine, but no, it's codependence. And so similarly with, just like the early stages of dating and in terms of just being cautious, it's really more, it's not even necessarily like energetically, it's not even necessarily cautious. It's just like good sense safety practices. Like you don't have to be fearful, but just don't give away trust unearned.
There you go.
Takes time. It takes time to earn trust. And, also trust, from the heart type of trust, but also like with your personal info, like be wary, you don't necessarily want to give away your personal info. And like you said, also like be wary of them giving you personal info too. Like, and maybe they're not scammers, but it's a sign that they're either scamming you or that they have poor boundaries.
Yes. And
if they have poor boundaries, that's going to be a messy relationship. And they're going to end up overgiving. People with poor boundaries overgive and then resent. And it makes an ugly cycle. And I don't recommend it. So just in general dating terms, watch for people with poor boundaries, like people giving too much info away too quickly. Yeah, it's not
people
really
professing their love for you too early. Like you said, trust and love both have to be earned. And so, somebody could be listening to me and saying, but you did this. So I was listening to this person talk. I was open to him being real, but I was also being aware of what was happening, what was playing out. And again, my role was one lie. I couldn't disprove or prove. So, but what I really liked you said is it's not about what was the word you said? It's, to me, it's about being aware. When my daughter was young and I was teaching her to be aware of her surroundings, she'd say, Mom, you're so paranoid. I said, no, I'm not paranoid. I'm aware. I walk into a parking lot, I'm aware of who's there. So it's the same thing like this. I'm not going in thinking this is not real or this is, something bad. I just have my radar up and I'm kind of going, are those butterflies because this is fun? Because it was fun. I had a lot of fun. It's true.
To each their
or
own.
are they because something is telling me, talking to me?
And I think, when you talk about that it's like situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about, self-awareness, but even just having contextual awareness in kind of a broader sense is also really important. Like, remember the fact that, like, no matter how connected you feel, you've only known them for like 3 days. Like, don't lose sight of that, right? And just, and maybe if you're in person with them and how they say, like, oh, they made you feel like you're the only person in the room. Well, don't forget, it's not that. You are surrounded by other people, which, like, there's so much more context that we can, like, kind of lose sight of. We get all hyper focused when we get infatuated, and so it's important to stay grounded in that.
A good example of that is that one of the classic asks will be that somebody's over, either they have lived in Europe or somewhere else, not the United States, or not wherever you're living, I should say, because your audience is broad. But and then all of a sudden, the money they were going to use to get here, their granddaughter needs the surgery and they need the money, and they need more in order to be able to pay that and then get here. Now, you may have known them 2 weeks.
Pulling on the heart.
I know people that I have known years that I'm not sure I'm giving them money. Right. So, I mean, there's just no way that I would say, I cannot substantiate this. I would say the ask is usually 1 to 4 weeks, maybe if it's all cyber-based. Some of the ones that are in person, they're dating this person for 4 months, 5 months, and then the ask comes. So it seems to be a longer game when it's in person. But I mean, you just don't know somebody that long. And yes, there's a promise that it'll be paid back, but I guarantee you it will not.
And this is where, like, having a good sense of what loving boundaries look like is where you can, like, in my mind, the most loving type of boundaries are neither spiked walls or flimsy fences, but they're like selective gates. And the way that they're implemented in a loving way is where you don't break connection. You empathize and you say, wow, that sounds really horrible. Like, I can hold your hand through it. I can't send you money, but I'm really sorry that you're going through that. And in general, like, as a super loose rule, I like saying something in the effect of, like, I'm not available for that, but I am available for this. Like,
that's interesting, because I had made it abundantly clear that I had no financial resources I tactfully woven that into the whole thing. So the ask was, could I help raise money for his debt?
I'm not available for that
I
either.
Cannot. Then I actually called the FBI and said, why would he continue to contact me? And what's the ask? He goes, oh, he just wants your identity so he can steal it. He just wants more time with you to get more information. So, it's just so interesting that,
It is indeed. Let's take one more break. You're listening to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya, and my guest, Trish Laub. We've been discussing some safe practices for modern dating. And when we come back, we'll explore a few more and some tips for staying grounded with a new love interest. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. And you can find me online at lovecoach.mariya.com. And my guest today is Trish Laub, author, consultant, and speaker. If folks want to get in touch with you, Trish, tell us one more time where to find you.
You can go to Trish Laub, TRISHLAUB as in boy.com.
Thank you so much. Before the break, we were discussing safe practices for modern dating, and we're just about to get into a few more, along with some tips for staying grounded with a new love interest. So we touched on this a little bit, but in addition to scammers, it's also helpful to just watch for love bombing, prince-like charm, or feeling like you're under a spell. And something that I've been developing a lot of awareness around lately is self-abandonment. Anything, like some of the most common ways that we abandon ourselves are something comes up in conversation or in the environment or something, and they say like, oh my gosh, I love that. And you're like, so do I. Or maybe something comes up and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing ever. And you're like, oh yeah, no, totally. But you actually do like it, right? So those things where we like contort ourselves to try and fit whatever we think. You're so loud. Whatever we think that they will like. Clearly my dog does no such thing. But there's, that's kind of one of the early signs of self-abandonment. And you do that for months and years, and eventually you completely lose yourself in the relationship. So just in general, if you notice yourself doing that early on, just, ask yourself, like, am I afraid of showing up as myself? Or have I already actually received some indications that I'm not really safe to be, like, if I am myself, I will be rejected. And if the latter is the case, then that's where we just have to like do our work to beef up and like be okay with that rejection, right? It's not rejection, it's redirection. And it can be hard. It can be easier said than done, rather. Sometimes it's really challenging to overcome that like hardwired fear of rejection.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to boundaries too.
Absolutely.
Boundaries are a great thing as long as they're enforced. And sometimes in this whole kind of whirlwind of love bombing and all those other things, I've seen a lot of people just let those boundaries slide, thinking that if they put the boundary in place, they will lose the person. And I heard somebody say last night, I was in a group and somebody said, if the person leaves because you set your boundaries, it's not because of your boundary. The setting of the boundary didn't make them leave. It just escalated or accelerated something that was going to happen anyway. So set the boundaries, stick
and
to
honor them.
Mm-hmm. But I think all that, infatuation stuff, it's very easy to let those slide.
Absolutely. Yes. And detrimentally so. And I think also maybe another thing I hadn't really considered that I think something we do a lot is maybe we'll mention a boundary and then maybe it gets kind of overstepped, but we're like, well, we assume that like they know that they overstepped and they know that we already said what it is. And so they won't do it again. And then they do it again. And then we're like, well, I told them. And it's like, no, you have to enforce it every time. It's like setting a boundary is rarely a one-time occurrence. But if you have to reinforce it several times, then you might want to start to consider what you're doing.
And you need to know what the consequence to going across that boundary is.
Well, and I like to say that one of the, and again, this is kind of an overgeneralized formula, but I like to state boundaries in terms of when X, I feel Y, and so to care for myself, I will do Z. So when I receive harsh criticism, I feel a lot of shame. And so to care for myself, I will remove myself from the situation. And therefore you're telling the person ahead of time what to expect in terms of cause and effect. And then when it happens, it becomes your responsibility to honor your boundary. It's not really ever anyone else's responsibility. There's interpersonal accountability. And if they continue to fail at that, you might want to question the relationship, but it's always your responsibility to honor your boundaries.
Yes.
Versus needs. Needs are different than boundaries. They're both super valid, legitimate things, but they're slightly boundaries are just your limits.
Yes.
But that also reminded me though of something that you, I think, had also mentioned at some point about, I think, we were talking about like the tugging on the heartstrings. And, I think I would imagine that a lot of scammers probably use things like guilt trips and peer pressure.
Yes. So when I finally said goodbye to the skilled person, they came back and I wouldn't answer the phone. So the next message was that what I was doing was wickedness. And he knew that my hot button is honesty, the one lie thing. And so then he said I had been dishonest. He knew exactly where to go. And I thought, as I'm listening to this recorded message, I can see how maybe when I was younger, that might have pulled me right back in. But here I was just like, yeah, whatever. Interesting, whatever.
Yeah. And it's really important to know yourself and to be able to recognize that like someone else's opinion of you isn't necessarily true. You can do a quick check and be like, nope, I'm not out of alignment. That's okay if you think I am. I'm okay with that,
Right.
So being able to stay grounded, I think one of the most important keys to staying grounded is paying attention again to how you feel. And really kind of almost like on a side note, you got to have a steady, strong embodiment practice to help you really get attuned to what your body is telling you. And so you can actually hear your intuition over the other voices. For a while, I used to say, like, I'm pretty sure I have intuition, but I can't tell which voice it is. There's the head, the heart, the gut. I'm like, I don't know which is which. And it wasn't until I started learning how to feel into my body that I could discern that. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest keys to this. So, got to go into it grounded. You got to honor your boundaries, brace yourself for rejection from the misaligned, and don't worry too much about the red flags, watching for red flags. Instead, focus on the green flags. Go around looking for green flags. And if you don't see them, it's namaste. Like, look for your green flags, manifest what you do want,
And what I love that you kind of alluded to is this isn't about, realizing that you're dealing with somebody that's not real or whatever, and being angry and it's being trauma and all that stuff. No, it's just with the breath of kindness, blow it away.
Let them walk on their path and you
turn
stay
the
on
other
yours.
direction, go a different direction. It doesn't have to be a charged thing.
Absolutely.
Just if it's not aligned, walk away.
That's it.
Yeah.
Again, easier said than done, but it's truly that simple.
Yes.
Well, this has been such a delight. Gonna go ahead and wrap things up. And if you would like to learn more about our beautiful guest here, go to trishlaub.com, TRISHLAUB. As a reminder, I can be found at Love Coach Mariya, spelled MARIYA.com. I lead a free online community for women navigating the challenges of insecure relationships in the Facebook group Empowered Compassion, and also off social at empoweredcompassion.community. I facilitate a virtual ashram for women working to build the foundations of an authentically aligned life and a balanced interdependent relationship, and that's called Peaceful Power Practice. You can ask me about enrollment. And my standing offer is one-on-one coaching for women seeking guidance and tools for relational health. The first call is always on me. Reach out anytime via Facebook, my website, or email me at connect@lovecoachmariya.com. And with that, my friends, I bring this journey to its conclusion. Thank you all for joining me. Stay safe out there. And thank you, Trish, for sharing yourself with us and unpacking these heart-centered topics with me today.
Thank you.
The topic of our next episode is choosing yourself, how to recover from a lifetime of self-abandonment, with my friend and personal trainer, not my personal trainer. I don't know her in person, but her name is Tori Daniel. And I look forward to diving into that with you. I'm Love Coach Mariya, and you are loved. Thank you for listening to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. Tune in every second and fourth Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com for an ample set of practical tools that will help you develop internally rooted security, the foundation of a balanced, interdependent relationship. You'll also learn how to empower your compassion, which will alchemize the soul and transform any relationship. Learn more at lovecoachmariya.com. That's lovecoachmariya.com.